Imagine that you've done everything right with your life and by 41 years old have secured your retirement, only to wake up one day and find that your life's work and entire net worth has been confiscated as the result of a hyperinflation event. This is something that happened to our guest today as he was living in Lebanon during a liquidity crisis which saw the Lebanese pound devalue 99% against the US dollar between February 2023 and into early 2024. Tony Yazbeck is the co-founder of the Bitcoin Way and has joined us today to share his story of the perils of trusting your financial future to central banks. I'm Scott Dietels. I'm the CEO and founder of Block Rewards, and part of our mission in bringing Bitcoin to the workplace is helping people understand how it will help them. So if you're interested to learn something about why Bitcoin preserves your financial sovereignty and why that's important, stick around. This is a high signal conversation and one everybody should hear. All right, welcome to another episode of the Block Reward podcast. We're joined this week by special guest Tony Yazbeck, co-founder of the Bitcoin Way. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Happy to be here.
Cool story for our listeners as to how this episode came to be. I was introduced to you, Rick Messett, who was on our show a month or two back, sharing his sort of tragic story about Bitcoin custody. And after I was done recording with him, Rick was like, you got to talk to Tony. You know, Tony's got this amazing story. And I hadn't heard of you. And so yeah, I now that I have consumed some of your stuff, I'm really excited for you to share your story, which is really something. So I just want to thank you again for coming on.
Sure, man. Yeah, my story. I mean, yeah, it's cool. It's cool in hindsight, but in the moment, it was definitely not cool at all. In fact, it was the worst possible nightmare any human being can go through. When you literally, get up one day and realize that your entire life, and I mean all of it, 100% of it, has been completely rug pulled, literally overnight, which is exactly what happened to me and everyone else living in Lebanon when the banks effectively stole everybody's life savings and locked them out of their accounts. So when you wake up to that, in the moment, you think it's some sort of like joke or a bad joke. But then when you very quickly realize that, no, it's not a joke and nobody at the bank, is picking up the phone or responding to any questions or concerns, well, the panic sort of seeps in because like now you literally have no money and no way to buy anything. And, all of a sudden, all your daily expenses that, you generally take for granted because they're not such a big deal because you can cover them. Now, all of a sudden, they're like this mountain, this problem that you can't overcome. And so, it was a really, really bad predicament because there's no solution. And so it took me a very long time to just come out of the mental shock that it caused me, because at the same time, obviously, there's nobody around to help you, because everybody's in the same predicament. So it's not a scenario I wish upon anyone. It's a horrific one. And there's a lot of folks that I knew once upon a time that are unfortunately not here anymore because of this. Because, when somebody drops a nuke on your life, of this magnitude, not everyone has the strength to come out of it, because, like I said, it's nothing anyone can prepare for. No matter how tough you think you are. And I generally like to think of myself as, as a strong individual. I've, ran 3 businesses in the past and been very successful, thankfully, with, the stuff that I've worked in. I've worked in tech all my life, but even I wasn't prepared for something like this. And so this is what led me to being here.
For the benefit of our listeners, you were living in Lebanon in February of 2023, the Central Bank of Lebanon made the decision to devalue the Lebanese pound overnight by 90% in an event that triggered a 98 or 99% reduction over the course of a year in the value of the pound. And inflation numbers soared in 2023, something into the over 200% inflation in that year. So this is something that I think like a lot of people, either in the West, maybe you're just not aware of at all, or would assume this is something that couldn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a delusion that a lot of people unfortunately hide behind, and this is what also the same delusion that I had. I mean, why would you think something like this would happen to you when everything's been super peachy for the last 30 years?
So you wake up one day and the credit cards don't work. The banks aren't answering calls. I've seen news stories about there was people going to rob the banks just to try to get their own money out of the bank. And you've talked about this idea that the banks are bankrupt. The banks don't have your money. Can you just tell me a little bit about what all that was like when you were in the moment?
The thing is, the problem happened before 2023. It started in around October 2019 when everything started to fall apart in that country. And what happens after your money was locked in and nobody was allowed to take anything out? If you had US dollars in your Lebanese account, it was illegally converted into that worthless local currency, which was then hyperinflated to oblivion. So not only were you locked out of your money, you weren't allowed to take it, but it was illegally converted. Like the US dollar doesn't belong to the Lebanese government or the banks, but yet they took everybody's savings and they converted it to the Lebanese pound, which was, worth less than toilet paper, and that hyperinflated to nothing. And so if you had $1 million, for example, in the Lebanese bank, it was worth $100 after this catastrophe. So what happened afterwards was chaos beyond any horror movie you've ever seen, because people were at that point were desperate. Like, what are you going to do? Like your life still goes on. You still have expenses to pay. You have kids to feed. If you have, sick members of your family, you have to find the medications for them, hospital bills to account for. Like, where do you get that money from if, the banks have locked you out of your funds? And so obviously, in extreme situations like this, well, good people resort to doing bad things because instinctively they go into survival mode. And this is where you started seeing and reading about the stories about people going into banks, holding them up at gunpoint. It wasn't that they're going in to steal somebody else's funds. They were in there to recover their own savings that they've been working for the past, 30, 40 years to accumulate. And now all of a sudden, with a blink of an eye, it's gone. And so when something like this happens, you start questioning, like, how is this even possible? Because for the longest time, the Lebanese banking system was touted as, one of the best ones globally. There were, a lot of mainstream media wrote articles about it, like it's the 5-star example that other banks around the world should copy. And because they know how to lead and they know how to manage people's funds, et cetera, et cetera. And then, overnight, poof, the money is gone. And so how did this all happen? Well, then, that's when, I started, going down the rabbit hole and questioning everything because it just did not make sense. But, you're doing this in such a bad state of mind that it takes you in all sorts of directions. And it really took significant amount of mental strength to remain focused and not completely lose it because everyone around me was losing it. And so I had to find some sort of sane solution just to survive, okay? Because I had people who depended on me. I had people, to feed. It wasn't just me. If it was me on my own, it would have been less of a problem. But because, I have dependents, all of a sudden you're frantically looking for solutions. Long story short, all this chaos led me to crypto initially. And I very quickly realized that was also garbage, but it led me down the rabbit hole of the truth about money. And this is when I understood that the money that we've been led to believe had value and that we were told you just have to go be successful, save it in the bank, and you live happily ever after. All of this was a lie, regardless of the fiat money that you were working, whether it was dollars, whether it was euros, whether it was Japanese yen, it doesn't really matter. All of that fiat currency, the mechanics behind it were founded on the same lie. It's a scam. It's a fraud. It's a Ponzi created by a bunch of thieves that have somehow managed to convince the world that this garbage has value and, has put us into this system of modern slavery and, thinking that you have to slave all day in order to work for this worthless paper. that 1% who's sitting next to the money printer can print for free, at the expense of everybody's time and energy. So when you understand this, it redefines your entire life. Like I say, like when it clicks, there's nothing that's going to unclick it anymore, because you very quickly realize what the scam is and what's really happening. And that really pissed me off, because, nobody likes to be scammed. Nobody likes to be conned. And that's exactly how I felt, because I don't consider myself an idiot. But, since the day you're born, you're taught that things work a certain way. And so you assume that that's the norm, and you carry on, you follow the rules, you play by the guidelines that you've been taught, only to realize later that all of it was a lie, and that, you were taken advantage of. And all of a sudden somebody decided, okay, enough is enough. And they threw you to the curb. This is what happened. And eventually all roads led me to thankfully finding Bitcoin. And I'm really grateful that whoever this entity was, Satoshi Nakamoto, that they created this thing, because it was the only reason why I'm still here today, because it gave me hope. I'm like, this cannot happen to me again. But I wasn't able to find any way to prevent this, because this Ponzi is like, it's like a monster with like a million tentacles. It's everywhere. So how do you get rid of it? There's only one way to get rid of it. One of them is not feasible, is that you go to war with it. Like, unless you have an army bigger, than the governments and the central banks, you're not going to war with anything. The other way is, to find that sly roundabout way to defund them, to exit the system. So someone in 2008 must have also had enough with the collapse that happened back then, and created this gift to the world that allows us to exit out of the theft of the fiat system. But because it's brand new technology, nobody's ever seen it. Like humanity has never seen or heard of a concept like Bitcoin before. And so it's extremely foreign, and it scares everyone. And there's all sorts of, rumors. It's a myth. It's a scam. It's a Ponzi. All sorts of nonsense going about, which is normal. Even I had my doubts in the beginning about this thing being too good to be true. But because I was in such a dire situation, I had all the time in the world to actually do the work and dive deep into what this is, to try to blow it up myself, to see if this was even possible. Because my background was in tech and cybersecurity. So, this was more or less in my play field, right? So I failed. And so I'm like, okay, well, let me research it some more. Let me ask, some more intelligent people what they think about this. Well, and I realized that they failed. And then eventually I realized that governments have been trying to blow this up and they failed. And that that grows your conviction. And the more I read and the more I asked and the more videos I watched, the quicker I realized that, hold on a second, like this is something that wasn't born overnight. This is something that has been brewing for many, many years. But Bitcoin is probably the first version of it that actually worked. And so fast forward 15 years later, this thing's become so decentralized and so strong that nothing can stop it anymore. But we are still so primitively early to the tech, because Bitcoin is like, think of it as the internet when the first dial-up modem was invented. That's how early we are, maybe even earlier than that, because less than 1% of the global population even knows about it. And so the education around something so revolutionary is so important. And it's not that it's just important. It's important to push it out in a quick time frame. Like, you don't want this to drag for another 100, 200 years before people get it. You want this information to reach folks like now, because the fiat system has failed already, as far as I'm concerned. It's not that it's failing, it's failed. It just, certain fiat currencies are bigger, and that the timeline for them to actually blow up is just going to take a little longer. The last one being the US dollar, since it's a global reserve, it's the last cockroach to die. But it is dying. But the calamity that it's going to bring, along with it, is something that no one is prepared for. And so how do you prevent this? You can't prevent the collapse. It's already done. They're over $35 trillion in debt. There's no way to pay it. but somebody has to. It has to be paid somehow. So if you can't pay it financially, it has to be paid through another means. And that other means usually is a horror story. And so how do you protect yourself? Well, you have to exit that system. But because it's so new, it's extremely volatile. And so people that don't understand this, all they look at is that volatility, that fiat number representation. And they get all sorts of crazy ideas, because most people don't understand money. I never understood money either until I read a few books, one of them being, the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous. And that just like lit up right away. It made sense. But if you don't read these books and nobody tells you these things, you're just functioning on what your parents told you, what their parents told them, which was that whole lie to begin with, right? So the bullshit carries on from generation to generation until somebody stops it. And in my case, I was that person who put an end to it, at least in my immediate circle, because I understood what happened. It happened to me. Nobody had to convince me that this was a movie. This was real life. Everything about me blew up and I had to rebuild it. And so once you understand all this and you pick up all that knowledge, you become like a force. This whole destruction weaponized me into a tool of education. So my entire existence was formatted. Now my whole purpose is redefined. The reason why we put together the Bitcoin Way is because I wanted to make sure that this never happens to anyone else, and to make sure that legacy system, those crooks, those criminals that are currently destroying people's lives, are ended once and for all. And the only way we're going to do this, since we can't go to war with them, is to educate the masses as much as possible, the peaceful revolution. But because people are stuck in their biases, and because some people are, living in dire situations where they have to put food on the table immediately, there's no time to wait for the volatility to die out. It's much harder to convince these folks, but it's usually those people that need something like Bitcoin the most, because otherwise they're just like little hamster on the wheel that are stuck in that circle, that never ending circle of pain, and they don't know how to get out of it. The other problem is those living in the West and Europe that have never seen such a calamity like the ones I've described, because they believe that this could never happen to them because they live in New York, in Beverly Hills, or wherever it may be. People like myself who are living well in Lebanon also never thought this would happen to me. In fact, there were billionaires living in Lebanon, lives, quality of lives like you've never seen in the West and in Europe. And these same people woke up the next morning homeless. It didn't matter how many zeros you had in your bank account the night before. All you have now is one big single zero with nothing before it. And so if it can happen to us, it's going to happen to you eventually. And that eventually is not, I'm not talking the next 50 years. The way things are progressing globally, I think in less than 5 years, we see something. I even think by the end of 2024, something will break. I don't know what it is, but I have a feeling something's about to break. And when it does, that's when you're going to see like the ripple effect of that damage accelerate in a way that I don't think anybody's prepared for. And that worries me, because when people are in a state of panic and they don't understand what is going on, they start doing irrational things. I've seen good people do extremely horrible things, not because they're bad people, but because they're desperate. And so take the US, for example, which is 1 million times bigger than Lebanon, which is like a drop in the bucket compared size-wise to the US. Add to the fact that you guys have, 400 to 500 million privately owned assault weapons because it's a constitutional right? And add to that one day some fabricated cyber attack that locks everybody out of their bank accounts, right? Which is what I think is going to happen. They're going to fabricate some sort of cyber attack. Oh, look, we're being attacked by terrorists. Nobody can access the bank accounts. So people are locked out of their money. They have no idea why. What do you think is going to happen if it drags on for a few days, which I think it will on purpose to cause that pain, right? So you've got 400 million.
9 meals to anarchy.
I've seen this in a tiny scale in Lebanon. Okay. Put the same scenario in the US with 400 to 500 million privately owned assault weapons, and people have no idea what's going on. What do you think is going to happen? That's the scenario that I'm petrified of, because no one has seen, like I said, nobody's seen this horror movie before because we've never had to live it. Now we are about to. And so they fabricate a cyber attack. They lock everybody out of their bank accounts. They leave it, they let it drag for a few days just to cause the pain. Why? Because then they're going to come in and tell you, oh, don't worry, guys, we figured it out. We have a solution for you. We're going to make everybody whole. But this time, you're not going to get your dollars back. You're going to get your balance back, but it's going to be in a central bank digital currency or some stupidity like that. But you have to download this cool little app, this digital app, in order to access your money. And that's it. If you get stuck in a system like this, consider your life over, because nothing about your decisions from that moment on will be yours anymore. You say something they don't like, money goes off. You buy too much meat, card stops working. Everything about you is decided by somebody else who thinks they know better than you and has the right to dictate how you and your family and your kids, everybody around you should be living their lives. Okay? Like, we are living in this lunacy right now. It's no longer a conspiracy theory. It's real life. You just have to look around you to understand that this is not a crazy person saying this stuff. This is real life. There's a bunch of psychopaths that genuinely believe they have the right to play God and dictate how all of us are going to live our lives. And so if you stay in their system, you're going to get consumed by it, and you'll have no choice but to comply if you want to live. If you want to eat, if you want to drink, if you want to live somewhere, well, you have to comply. You have no choice. So if you don't want to comply, well, you have to have a means of survival. And without money, you can't do anything. So how do you get this money? Right? Well, you have to, that's why I said, thankfully, we have this option called Bitcoin, which is the only option we have outside the system that nobody can control, nobody can manipulate, nobody can threaten you with, nobody can sanction you with, nobody can regulate, nobody can tax, nobody can do anything with it. No matter what they think and what they want, they can't do anything with it other than use it, right? Because it's peer-to-peer technology. You cannot stop peer-to-peer technology no matter what you think, no matter what you want. It's just not going to happen. And so if you want to live free, you need to be able to pay for your life. And the way you're going to do it is, again, by having the money that you own, but you need to own it. See, that's the key here, because we've been taught to believe that money needs to be in a bank. Somebody else is responsible for it. Like, we don't have to worry about this. Now you're the head of security. You're the bank. And so that very notion petrifies a lot of folks. Understandably, shit, I'm going to screw it up. If I make a mistake, I'm going to lose all my money, because that is a fact. In Bitcoin, there's no refund center. If you make a mistake, depending on how bad it is, you can either lose your funds or lock yourself out of your funds, which is even worse, because you can see your balance, but you can't use it. So all that information needs to be taught. And so what I see is a lot of the same mistakes happening over and over again, where people they see Bitcoin, they want Bitcoin, but they go and buy Bitcoin and they leave it, for example, on an exchange, or they entrust a third-party institution to protect it for them. Again, because they don't trust themselves to do it. And so they revert back to the only knowledge they know, which is similar to what they had with the banking system. I can trust these people. They'll help me take care of my money. And repeatedly, over and over again, one by one, they all blow up. We had, the Mt. Gox, we had the FTX, and God knows what else is going to come next. With people are going to keep losing money and automatically assuming that all of this is a scam because they didn't do their work and take full custody of their funds, right? So this is what I see happening, and this is what we're trying to fix at the Bitcoin way as much as possible by providing, the right education, the unbiased education. See, we don't sell any hardware or software, so we are not financially incentivized to promote anything or anyone. We are think of us the Switzerland of knowledge here. We are neutral ground. We test everything that's out there. and to filter out what's good, what's bad. If somebody's breaking the rules or trying to do something shady, we call them out. Some people don't like that, but who cares? We're not here to benefit any company. We're here to push the right education so that hopefully enough people absorb it and learn to avoid all the common traps and mistakes that have, led to loss of funds in the past.
For people who are new and listening, and aside from reaching out and contacting you guys at Bitcoin Way, what are some of the sort of key things people should be thinking about as they're starting a journey of self-custodying their own Bitcoin?
Well, for starters, I would recommend people study Bitcoin before you take any sort of, drastic action. Study Bitcoin and understand what it is to begin with. Just to sum it up, really, it's a decentralized money. It's a store of value. It's it's money, except it's money that's not created or managed by any government. It doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to the people. Think of it as like internet money. And in order to use it, properly, you need to fully own it, right? Like you need to be fully responsible over it. You can't leave it somewhere else. You get, the process of owning it, involves a few simple steps that you have to learn, which involves a cold wallet, running your own node, that type of thing. It's not nuclear science, but it's new. And so like, you took a course to drive a car and now you're a great driver. You ask a few questions, you learn a few steps, you learn how to self-custody your money. But you have to be willing to unlearn the old lies that you've been taught, that paper money that you're slaving over from 9 to 5 is money or has value. That thing has no value. It's created out of thin air. It's literally toilet paper that is ripping you off on a daily basis. If you're making $1,000 a month, okay, and you're putting it in that bank account, inflation alone, if you want to see like the real numbers, it's anywhere between 15 and 20%. If you do nothing, you're already losing 15 to 20%. Then they tax you on it. Depending where you live, 30 to 50%. That's gone, right? What's left from your $1,000? Not much. So what you used to buy for $1,000, now you can only buy maybe 2 of them. And as the days progress, as the money printing continues to increase, well, your purchasing power goes from $1,000 to maybe $10. That's what's happening if you're working for money. So your only alternative is to stop working for it and start looking for an alternative. Bitcoin is that alternative. It's money that nobody can control. It's a finite asset. Nobody can print more of it. It's 21 million from now to the end of time, no matter what. And so 4 or 5 million of them have already been lost. So technically there's much less, maybe 16 and 17 million of them around. And so instead of earning your income in, let's say, dollars or euros, start earning your income in sats and satoshis, which is Bitcoin. And so not only does that preserve your time and energy, but that value, that purchasing power that you're earning with now actually goes up over time. It doesn't go down, right? But again, this is where it takes proper education to convince people that this is a reality. It's not like a movie or some fairy tale gimmick, that somebody is trying to sell on the internet, because a lot of countries have adopted it now. El Salvador has adopted it. And usually it's the countries that have gone through hell that are much easier to convince that Bitcoin is the solution. And if you look, it's usually these places that have the quickest adoption rate of Bitcoin. Is because they went through the pain. They know what it's about and they never want to see it again. But if you've never experienced it or think it can never happen to you, well, then, in my opinion, you're setting yourself up for financial suicide, because no matter how rich you think you are, when the currency collapses, and it will collapse, if you had 11 zeros in your bank account, you're going to end up with 1, just like everybody else before you did. So my advice to people is, start learning about Bitcoin, buy some, not necessarily a lot, at least buy some, enough for it to make an impact in your life. Like for you to say, okay, well, I've got this now what do I do with it? And, start learning more about it, start asking the questions. And I promise you, the more you understand what you own, the higher your conviction will be and the more you will find yourself allocating to it. Like I've spoken to people that have come from a 1% allocation that are close to 80%. Some of them are at 100%, but most of them who started with 1-2%, after a while on their own are now at about 80% in Bitcoin, living on a Bitcoin standard. Because once you are on that standard, life actually becomes cheaper for you. Because again, you're holding money that appreciates in value. So your purchasing power goes up, not down. But if you're only making money in fiat, everything's getting more expensive for you. And it's going to continue to get worse because that worthless piece of paper is being debased in real time every time that money printer goes on. So all of these wars that are being concocted around the world as a distraction, right? Because that's all they are. They're distractions to justify the money printing. Because if they stop money printing, doomsday happens in 5 minutes. The system was built on debt. So, the Ponzi has to keep going. But now the difference is you need so much more money printing to keep the Ponzi going that it's unsustainable. Like it's reached like its finish point, right? So this is why I'm saying that I don't think we have a long time before that boom happens. And whoever's not ready is unfortunately going to learn this the very painful way.
Yeah, the statistics, I think, are something like it took 200 years for the U.S. to accumulate $1 trillion of debt, and now they're accumulating another trillion every 30 to 90 days.
Over the summer. So just imagine.
People don't think in exponential fashion, right? And it's like the process of debasement has been just slow enough over the course of most people in the West's lives. It's like watching an iceberg melt almost, but it's like, even that iceberg gets to a point where it's melted enough and then it cracks in half and then it loses its structural stability. I've seen you also discuss the importance, which I think is a great thing for people to understand, the trust required in a money system between countries, which Bitcoin solves by not having one country be an issuer. Can you just talk a little bit about why that's important and the significance of what that means?
Well, the thing is, none of the countries, no governments trust each other. Okay. So if they're going to decide on what money to use at some point, why would they settle on anything that they know somebody else has an advantage over them with? They're going to bicker around, different things. Historically, that usually ended up in wars and, the strongest army won and, that money became, the dominant one. Now all fiat currencies are failing. And so, again, we've never had a neutral money that is not owned by any one country. And they all know that no other government can do anything to gain an advantage over them. So I genuinely believe that all these governments that are talking rubbish about Bitcoin are like trying to, cast a bad light on it. They're all accumulating it. And at some point in the future, they're going to come about and announce, oh yeah, well, you know what? No, Bitcoin is the greatest thing. It's good for national security or whatever other, BS marketing they're going to spew at. And then, everybody's going to think it was actually the government's idea to create Bitcoin, right? There's going to be enough people to believe that nonsense. But at the same time, I think once we get to that point, and I don't think it's going to take that long, anyone attempting to disrupt the Bitcoin network will be committing a crime. As crazy as that sounds now, because now it's the foundation of the economies, right? Like now you have politicians talking about Bitcoin reserves. You've got politicians fighting, over each other to see who's going to push Bitcoin adoption the hardest. You're at the fight we're at the fight you stage, but at the same time they join you phase. So, this is like, it's a funny transition to watch it happen in real time. But at some point in the very near future, I genuinely believe this is going to become like a standard as as countries continue moving away from the US dollar, which is accelerating, on a weekly basis now. They may try to try like the whole gold thing. It's not going to work. We're living in a digital age now. Gold was fine 5,000 years ago before the internet, but now, it's a nice shiny object. Yes, it won't lose, as much value as, fiat currencies, but it's nowhere near the scalability and, practicality of taking us into the future, like something like Bitcoin is. And plus gold, you can never audit its account. It's not a finite supply, heavily manipulated. So again, it has all these bad marks against it, which don't exist in Bitcoin. Again, it comes down to the inability of any human being to corrupt sound money. This is what's required in order to take humanity to the world that we want to live in, a world where you are genuinely free and where the power of money is completely stripped from all governments across the board, no exceptions, which in fact forces them to do their jobs, right? Which is to serve the people and not try to play God and dictate how everybody is going to live their lives. So you'll see wars diminish, no more wars. Who's going to fund them? Because, if you make a stupid decision on a Bitcoin standard, well, your sats are gone. You can't print them again. You can't create them out of thin air. So you're going to have to mull over every decision you make like 100 times to make sure it's a good one. Because again, if it's a bad one, the money's gone, it's gone. You're going to have to earn it back. So most problems around the world will disappear, in my opinion. Wars, crimes, genocides, all of that stuff. Because who's going to pay for them? Right now, all this is being funded by the money printer. Remove that, they vanish. Who's going to fund the armies to go fight these wars? Are soldiers going to go risk their lives for free? I don't think so. Who's going to fund them? You see what I mean? Like, it's all these evil things that are happening in the world. They all have one thing in common. It's fiat money. And if you have an unlimited supply of it, because, you just have to hit one button on a printer, well, then you can do whatever you want. So here comes along this thing called Bitcoin, and it castrates that ability. It pulls the plug away from the money printer. It blows it up completely. And so you remove all of this evil, almost instantly. Because now, humans are no longer in control of the money. Now humans have to be productive members of society. That's how you're going to earn your keep. Because if you don't provide value, who's going to pay you? And now you have AI that can replace you if your skill set is, a low-hanging fruit type of skill set. So it's going to force humanity to upgrade everything about them. Otherwise, you risk being replaced by AI, right? So all of these elements, like we're witnessing some crazy history in real time, which blows my mind. But at the same time, so many people are completely clueless about it. And the worst part is that they're clueless that they're clueless. That's even worse. Like, they don't know what they don't know. And when you try to explain it to them, you have to be very careful how you frame it so that they don't think you're crazy, right? Because that's happened. You try to orange pill someone and they look at you like you landed from Mars. So you sort of have to take the conversation and meet them where they're at, where they are in their lives. And if you do that with enough patience, because it's going to take a lot of patience, you eventually get there. Maybe not with everyone, but with enough. We don't need everyone to get there at the same time. Like, I don't think the world needs to have 100% adoption for Bitcoin to win. Bitcoin is already winning. I already see it. You just need, maybe 5% of the global population to adopt it properly, and the rest falls apart. Because then you start, leading by example, right? Like, people on a Bitcoin standard, they're living a good life. Nobody's complaining about money when you're living on a Bitcoin standard. I don't know about you, but I've never met a Bitcoiner that has complained about money, because their purchasing power, like I said, is going up over time. It's not going down. So when you're on a Bitcoin standard, even though you have to weather the volatility, sure, but when you zoom out, there's more good than bad being on it. And it's like you're essentially living in the future from now. So you get a taste of what that's like. So imagine when 8 billion people clue in on this, what's going to happen. And I don't think it's going to take a long time. A lot of people say, yeah, it's going to take 100, 200 years. I don't think so. Because when things break, they break fast. When the collapse in Lebanon happened, the trigger, you probably won't believe this, but the trigger for Lebanon's collapse was one day one of these idiot politicians decided it was a good idea to tax WhatsApp conversations. Can you imagine? Like, if you gave Steven Spielberg, a creative thought, he wouldn't have come up with this. Okay, so one of these morons thought it was a good idea to tax WhatsApp conversations because why not? Let's just rip them off even more. And so 15 minutes after the word got out that this was being discussed, the whole country fell apart. Everybody was on the streets in protests. So doesn't take something so sophisticated to cause a collapse. That's why I'm saying, like, we're hanging on a trigger. And at that trigger, I suspect is going to come very, very soon. And it's going to be something as stupid as thinking you can tax a WhatsApp conversation. So brace yourself. It's fun times.
Tony, do you think, this is like a little bit of a sidebar, but the question I always have is there a genuine competition between countries at the international level, or is it really the banks dictating what's going on?
That's a very good question. I think it's a combination of both. The banks, have always been in control of the money, the ability to print money out of thin air. Like who wouldn't want that? I mean, even recently, I think it was someone in the Central Bank of New Zealand, if I'm not mistaken. He went public with it. There's a video that went viral online quoting him say, being a central bank is the best job in the world because we literally print money out of thin air and these idiots believe it has value. These were literally his words. So how do you expect these people who have been dominating this field for so long to willingly give it up? They won't. They will fight tooth and nail to maintain their power over money because it's all about control, right? Like the fiat system, if you think about it, the fiat system was created for three things only: theft, surveillance, and control. There's nothing else to fiat. That's all it is, right? So remove that, the whole system crumbles because now the people, you, me, and 8 billion other people, now we are empowered. Now you can't rip us off anymore. So if we say no, it's no. You can't come here and force me to do something by threatening to take away my bank account. You don't own my bank account anymore because I don't have one, right? So this power shift is what's happening. And this is what we're fighting. Well, they're fighting us against, this is what's going on now. It's a power struggle.
There is obviously, like you said, it's not a light switch. And a transition of this magnitude is going to have some significant friction points. A question that I get asked that I'd love to hear your answer on is, if things really go sideways, how is Bitcoin going to be helpful for you? And maybe you can shed some light on your own personal story of, what that is like in practical reality.
Well, look, clearly if things fall apart very, very soon, most people are unprepared. So how that plays out, I couldn't tell you, but I know it's not going to be a pretty picture. However, I can speak for myself is that if I'm in a position to help, I will, right? People that I know that are in my immediate inner circle, family, friends, they're going to come out of the woodwork. Everybody's going to come out panicked. And all of a sudden, whether they know what you've done or haven't heard, they're going to find out very quickly. And I hope people that are in a position to help will actually do so in order to, calm down the fire that is likely to, break out because of something like this. Bitcoiners that I've met are extremely good people. I mean, I've never met a Bitcoiner that I didn't, click with. It's almost like a magical relationship. You meet someone for the first time and you can have a conversation for 7 hours as if you've known each other your whole life. It's unbelievable. And there's always someone willing to help because, Bitcoiners come from all walks of life. You have, accountants, doctors, engineers, whatever it may be. And so if you need something in the Bitcoin community, there's usually someone somewhere that's happily and readily available to assist. And this is what I'm hoping will continue to amplify so that, we win people over by becoming human again, by destroying this hate and division that is rampant globally now, and to embrace the the unity amongst human beings. Humans can live together peacefully. They don't have to hate each other. The hate and division is usually caused by someone stirring the pot. But when people don't take the time to think and just act, they look at one another. They don't look up to see who's causing all this trouble. Because if they did, then all that attention would be shifted upwards, remove that threat, and then, everything goes back to being peaceful. It's like that example with the red ants and the black ants in a jar. If you leave them, nothing happens. But when you shake that jar, they kill each other. And this is what's happening. This is what I see happening worldwide. People hate each other. They kill each other, all sorts of craziness. So do you blame the people or do you blame whoever's shaking that jug? But the problem is that people don't look up. They only look straight ahead. So there's also some responsibility on every one of us to take a moment to think, is this normal? It's not normal. Nothing about what's happening globally is normal anymore. So why is that? But nobody takes the time to question why. They just want to react. And instinctive reactions are usually, full of stupid decisions. So I'm hoping this changes somehow. I don't know if it will. I don't know if it will after we go through a nightmare. I don't know. But all I can tell you is that I hope people take the time to protect themselves. And the only immediate fix I see right now is one, to protect your money by opting out of the system, not necessarily at 100%, but start transitioning out of the legacy system because it is failing. And if you do nothing or hope that I'm wrong and you discover that I'm not wrong, well, again, that's a nightmare I don't wish upon anyone. So take the time to study Bitcoin, start transitioning out of the system, ask questions. There's plenty of people to help. We're one of them. There's plenty of resources online, but do something to come out of the system. The second thing is start finding like-minded individuals. Nobody can go through life on their own. You need a team, you need a brotherhood, you need like a community of people that you can depend on, because that's how you don't feel alone in this world. There's strength in unity, and there's a lot of folks out there that are, again, willing to help someone that they've just met, who's asking for help. You'd be surprised how many people will assist if you just ask for help. And if you don't like where you're living, move. Yes, it sucks to even think that I have to leave my country because I have family and friends and all that stuff. I had to do it. It wasn't pleasant, but it was the right decision, as uncomfortable as it was. See, again, if you want to be comfortable, you have to get used to being uncomfortable, at least in the short term, because it is the right decision. Because if I stayed in Lebanon and did nothing because, everybody was there and I have to be with them, I would have been destroyed completely along with them. But because I made the decision to break apart, to be like the lone wolf, so to speak, to break apart and do what I genuinely believed was right, because by some miracle, I was able to gather up the strength to do the work, to learn, to understand, and to sort of help myself get back up on my feet. Now, when their turn comes to blow up, at least I'm in a position to help. They don't see it now because they think everything's okay. But when that day comes and they're going to ask for help, at least, I'm in a position to help. And this is what I hope a lot more people do. Put yourself in a position to assist for when the day comes that, people around you ask you for help, that you're actually able to offer them that help.
Tony, really appreciate this conversation and you coming on and sharing your insights. This has been a very insightful conversation for me. So I want to thank you and really just express some gratitude for the work you're doing and how you've decided to dedicate your life.
Well, it's my pleasure, Scott. Thank you for having me, man. I know we shared a lot of information. Some of it may have been a little like doomy gloomy, but the point here wasn't to broadcast doom and gloom. In fact, I'm extremely bullish and optimistic on the future because I see the change happening. Bitcoin is winning. The adoption is growing. People are starting to get it. Not as much as I would hope to, but again, you don't need the 100% adoption for the change to take place. It just needs to keep accelerating at the rate that it is now. And it is happening. And so that's what keeps me hopeful. That's what I wake up every morning, very excited to talk to the next person, to assist the next person, to teach them how to self-custody their funds so that they can take this knowledge and pass it on to someone else in their immediate circle so that that ripple effect can carry on forever in the right direction. I see this happening. And people need to ignore the Bitcoin fiat price. Bitcoin number go up. That's complete rubbish. It's just a distraction. Ignore it. It means nothing. That number is going to flip to some sick, stupid number before you know it, literally in a matter of days when all hell breaks loose. So I'm not really concerned about this. The true value of Bitcoin is not the number go up. Bitcoin's value is your freedom, is people's freedom. Because without it, you have no life. Okay? So 1 Bitcoin equals 1 Bitcoin. 1 Bitcoin doesn't matter if it's $100 million. By then, that dollar is worth 0. So 1 Bitcoin is 1 Bitcoin. And the value of that Bitcoin is your ability to live life on your own terms without requiring anybody's permission. You're the boss. You're the king of your castle. You make the decisions that are best for you and for your family. As long as you're not breaking any legitimate neutral rules, nobody will dictate what you eat, where you live, who you talk to, what you say, and all of that rubbish that we're currently having to witness these days. That's what Bitcoin is about. And that's why you can't put a price on it. It's infinitely valuable.
I can share your sentiment more. It's, and I think even a lot of people who consider themselves Bitcoiners get caught in the trap of over-monitoring the short-term price and thinking of it as a trade for fiat. So hopefully your talk today will help some of our listeners maybe make that shift. We're going to include all the relevant links for where people can find you online. But is there anything specifically as a final thought, Tony, you want to share? Or?
You can find me anywhere. I mean, if people want to talk, obviously this conversation can go on for much, much longer. There's a lot of rabbit holes we can go into. There's a lot more information that can be shared. But ultimately, people, I just want people to start paying more attention to Bitcoin. And like you said, this is not a trade. Bitcoin is not a stock like Apple or Nvidia or Tesla that you're going to buy in the hopes of making fiat profits. You have to completely kill the notion that fiat has value. It doesn't. Fiat is what's making your life miserable right now. Whether you want to accept it or not, that is the root cause of almost everybody's problems. And if you want to fix that, well, you're going to have to leave it behind. And in order to do that, you're going to have to learn how. That's what Bitcoin was created for. And this is like, if you want the life that you've been dreaming about, Bitcoin can get you there.
Thanks again, Tony. And if you're listening and you made it all the way to the end of the show, I want to thank you as well for tuning in. And I hope to see you again next week.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Block Reward. We're trying to do something different here, creating accessible conversations meant for people who aren't obsessed with Bitcoin. If you found this episode informative and engaging, hit that subscribe button to make sure you stay updated with future episodes. Your feedback matters. We'd greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to share your reviews and help us with our goal of creating Bitcoin content that is simple and easy to understand. Bitcoin has an important role to play in the future of finance. It will change the way we save, spend, and invest. Discover why Bitcoin offers a game-changing opportunity for forward-thinking employers by visiting blockrewards.ca. Block Rewards' mission is helping Canadian employers implement strategies for integrating Bitcoin into compensation and benefits, supercharge your recruitment and retention strategies, and help your team members plan for the rising cost of living by rewarding their work with the hardest money ever invented. Special thanks to our top sponsor, Paramount Employee Benefits Consulting, Canada's only Bitcoin forward benefits and pension advisory. For more information, find them at paramountbenefits.ca. Big shout out to Podigy, our production team that makes all this possible, and BMX Escape for producing our music. Bitcoin is an expansive and dense topic many people walk away from early. To Bitcoin enthusiasts looking for that podcast they can share with friends, family, and colleagues, one they'll actually listen to, we hope that is us. The content of these conversations is meant to be provided for information purposes only. Nothing here is investment advice. Bitcoin is a big topic. Be sure to do your own research before making any personal financial decisions. Thanks for listening.